President Donald Trump made history this week as only the second president to ever win non-consecutive terms. He did so by assembling a coalition that few expected. For more on what a second Trump term could look like, we're joined by U.S. Senator and senior member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Marco Rubio. Senator, thank you for being here. You campaigned for and against Donald Trump in the past. What did you see this time around on this campaign, Senator Rubio, that made this such an unexpected success?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's unlike any campaign in American history, the level of energy and excitement. In fact, I remember commenting on multiple occasions to people on his campaign, to him personally and others, that, like, you know, whoever runs for president 4 years from now, it's going to be boring compared to this. I mean, very few people and figures in American history have been able to draw that number of people. And he hasn't been doing it just in the, you know, you see big rallies at the end of all these campaigns, but this has been going on for years. I mean, he did a rally for me when I ran for re-election in 2022. We must have had 25, 30,000 people stood in the rain to hear him speak and ruin his suit in that rain. And that came down pretty hard in Miami. So this has been going on for a while, just a tremendous amount of energy. You never know if that translates to the polls until Election Day, but it certainly did. It certainly did.
No, it's a force. Look, I've commented over the last few years, we will never see a political movement like this again. I mean, this is like Teddy Roosevelt. The acclaim, his power just as a speaker in front of a crowd to get them laughing. I mean, they hang on every word. It is something to see. It's certainly in politics, it's such a rarity. But Senator, the Hispanic vote was a huge factor in this election. Latino support for Trump was up 14 points, according to an Edison Research exit poll from 2020. And the Latino vote is no longer a lock for Democrats. What do you think drove those Latino voters to Trump and the GOP? I mean, he won Latino men by 12 points.
I think what drove it is that they're Americans. You know, I think what we have to start grappling with here, and I hope people will start comprehending, is that our primary identity for most people is not your ethnicity or the color of your skin. Your primary identity is that you work somewhere, or you have a small business, or you're raising children. And as a result, you're worried about things like how much it costs to buy groceries, how unaffordable life is at the end of every month. In this economy that we're living in today, how you fear every day you turn on the television and some new story about some criminal from another country that's here illegally, just raped or murdered someone. I mean, those things concern people of all walks of life. And this notion that somehow Hispanics are somehow immune from that and care more about some other issue other than that, I think is a mistake that I think is still being made by a lot of so-called political insiders and experts. I think Donald Trump instinctively understood it, and he campaigned to people who they were, as what their real identity is, as workers, as Americans, as parents raising children, and as people who care about our country.
Senator Rubio, there was an expectation that Trump's promise to lock down the border and deport illegal aliens would somehow hurt him among Latinos. It did not. To what do you attribute that to?
That I don't believe Latinos or Hispanics, we call them Hispanics on the East Coast, Latinos on the West Coast, but whatever we want to call it, I don't believe Americans of Hispanic descent, how about that, are in favor of illegal immigration. They're just not. The overwhelming majority of Hispanics and or their children came here legally through a process where you had to wait and there was paperwork and so forth. And they're not in favor of illegal immigration. But think about this, Raymond. If an illegal migrant crosses the border, let's say that person was a murderer in some other country, and they come to the United States and are committing crimes here, where do we think they're going? They're not going to Beverly Hills. Okay, they're not going to some fancy community somewhere. They're not going to where all these celebrities live. They are going to Hispanic communities. That is where they are going. That's who they are terrorizing. This gang from Venezuela, they are looking to terrorize Venezuelan communities. That's where they're most comfortable in operating. So the people that are coming face to face with this in real time, not in a documentary, in real time, are overwhelmingly Hispanics and Hispanic communities. So they're not in favor of illegal immigration. And I don't understand how people still can't grasp that just because you come from immigrant roots doesn't mean you are in favor of illegal immigration.
Senator, there's a caravan on its way to the United States now. I know the president-elect will be talking to the newly elected president in Mexico soon. Do you expect the Mexican government to cooperate with the United States on delaying or stopping those caravans from making their way up through Mexico?
You know, I think they would like to cooperate with the United States. Understand that the majority of the people that cross the border illegally are not Mexican nationals. They are people from all over the world, literally over 100-something countries from all over the world, and Mexico is just the transit point. So if Biden is going to say, if you come here and you show up illegally, we're going to release you, then more people are going to come, but they're going to come through Mexico. Mexico has to deal with it. And so if that's the policy of the United States under Joe Biden, the Mexican government's going to say, fine, then our job is to move you through as quickly as possible because we don't want them staying here. We want them to go through as quickly as possible. We're going to facilitate their movement. Now, if the president is saying, no, you can't come here anymore, we're not going to allow you to come in, now the Mexican government's going to have an incentive to say, well, you're not coming through here either. And that will go right down the chain. I mean, that'll also apply to all the way up to, down to Panama, where in the Darien Gap is where some of these journeys begin for many of these migrants. So I do expect them to cooperate because it's in their interest to cooperate, but they're only going to cooperate if it aligns with our policies, and they will under Donald Trump.
Tell me why you think the Catholic vote broke so decisively for Donald Trump. I mean, he obviously had deep ties in the broad faith community. He promised religious exemptions where Harris did not. But what do you think sealed the deal here?
Well, I'm speculating now, but I can speak from personal experience as a Catholic and American and someone who voted and supported Donald Trump, and that is, you know, our faith instills in us, hopefully, a set of values that are ancient and tested and proven and have been true for successful societies for thousands of years. And we are now living in an era where really important people, really powerful people are telling us that those values are not just wrong, they're hateful. That if somehow we believe, for example, that biological men should not be competing against women in women's sports, or that, you know, children we shouldn't have schools where children are being encouraged to turn, you know, your son is being encouraged to, maybe he's actually a girl and not a boy. We're being told that if you speak out against these things, you're some sort of an evil, retrograde, Neanderthal, backwards thinking person. And so they are, and so I think there's a real resistance to that. And the fact that we have very powerful people in charge of powerful institutions who openly not just undermine, but mock the values that our faith tries to instill in us. And then, of course, I also think people have not ignored these selective prosecutions of peaceful protesters outside of abortion clinics who were treated worse, by the way, than the rioters who burned down major cities in this country in the summer of 2012. I don't think people have overlooked that either.
Yeah, and it looks like 56% of Catholics broke for the president. I mean, we won't know until everything's tabulated, but that's what the exit polls tell us. What do you make of Kamala Harris waiting a day to concede, Senator Rubio, and then essentially issuing a threat to fight Trump? Is that the right tone at this moment, do you think?
Well, look, ultimately the timing, you know, when you lose an election, it's a tough thing, right? And so some people come to grips with that greater than others. Understand, they thought they were going to win. I mean, they were on stage with Beyonce and Oprah Winfrey and Taylor Swift and all that. Of course we were going to win. So I think they were caught by surprise, not just by the loss, but by the sheer scale and scope of the rejection. So that's hard. You know, I don't think that that's not hard. As far as fighting, look, yeah, we've always had a loyal opposition in this country. And I think you have to always remind yourself, if I'm in the opposition, you have to remind yourself there's a difference between being opposed and being deranged. And I think a lot of the opposition to Donald Trump is really based on a level of derangement where they are exaggerating in their own minds for their own big. They hate him so much because they have not been able to destroy him. Understand that before Donald Trump, they were able to bully and intimidate center-right Republicans into compliance or into silence in a lot of these questions. And Donald Trump is the first time that someone has both the power and the willingness to fight back and to fight their fire with fire. And they hate that. They hate the fact that they can't intimidate him, that they can't control him, that he doesn't surrender, that he doesn't cave. And it just drives this derangement. And I sense some of that in her speech as well the other day. But also a lot of shell shock, I think, was still in place.
Yeah. Senator, as you know, there's a lot of navel-gazing now in Democratic ranks about what happened. I spoke to a couple of folks who are major consultants in the Democratic Party. Why do you think Harris underperformed so spectacularly in this election, really coast to coast?
Because I think they're completely out of touch with what millions and millions of real people in everyday life are feeling and thinking in this country. Their campaign was a campaign that was focused on small bubbles that in Washington, in New York, in LA, in the entertainment industry, in the activist class, they think that they're activists. They think they're activists on transgender issues, they're activists on climate, they're activists on immigration, that all of these activists on what they call social justice, they think that all these activists are somehow reflective of the broader country. They are not. These are people, these used to be basically the crazy professors in the faculty club at a university, and now they've sort of been mainstream because of the power they have over major institutions, but they are not even close to the majority in huge swaths of our country. And in many cases, they're deeply offensive. And they come across as arrogant, they come across as preachy, they come across as condescending, as they think they're better than you because of their progressive values versus your backward thinking. And I just think they're completely out of touch with that. But that's what's taken over their party, and that's what's driving, what their policies. It's what's driving the way they campaign.
No, it's an interesting analysis. Senator Rubio, you are being mentioned, I don't have to tell you this, in some media as a cabinet post, for a cabinet post, rather, in this administration, and possibly a Secretary of State. Would you accept a cabinet post in a Trump administration?
Well, let me be clear, I haven't talked to them about it, and no one's offered that to me. The way I approach it is the following, and I'm not trying to be coy, I'm trying to be transparent here. Look, I'm interested in serving the country at a really key moment. And one of the reasons why I got so involved in the campaign, beyond truly believing that Donald Trump is the right man at the right time, is I feel so deeply that our country is at this inflection point where we're going to determine what the next 100 years look like. So I want to be a part of making sure we get that right, of turning that movement and that vote and that coalition you outlined, turning it into action, so that it becomes a governing coalition in this country that allows us to actually get good things done for America. And whether that's in the Senate or helping in his administration, that's a conversation we may have, and we'll figure out what the right choice is. But what I want to remind everybody is I'm already in the Senate, so I know no matter what, I am already in a place where I can make some of these things, help make some of these things a reality. If there's a better place, if that's God's will and plan for my life, and that opportunity presents itself, I wouldn't close the door to it. But that door hasn't opened right now, and I don't want to be presumptuous about that either.
Policy was obviously a factor in this election. U.S. involvement in foreign wars, the billions sent to Ukraine. How do you think President Trump's international vision will reshape U.S. policy vis-a-vis Ukraine, where they are now facing North Korean troops for the first time?
Yeah, I came to the Senate in 2010. The world we have today looks nothing like the world did in 2010. In 2010, we were in the last years of this unipolar world, right, where the United States basically was the sole superpower. Today, we're not in that world. Today, we are now in a world where China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran are increasingly cooperating with one another to undermine our interests in the world. We have now entered an era that has similarities to the Cold War in that it requires us to be pragmatic, and it requires us we are the greatest country in the world. We're the richest. We're the most powerful. But we, too, have limited resources. Every country does. And so we have to invest both our time and our money on things that serve our core national interest. We have to, and so there are a lot of great causes in the world, but we can't be involved in all of them. We just can't. We can't afford it, and no country can. You spread yourself too thin. We have to define what are our core national interests as a nation, and we have to really prioritize those. And that's what I think you're going to get. Yes, it's going to mean that there are some really bad things happening in the world, and we're all, but we can't be involved in all of them. We have to pick the things that are most important to America and to our security, and I mean that's the era we're now in, and we need to accept that, and we need to accept that pretty quickly and start making those right decisions. And I think that's what his foreign policy is going to be driven by. That and preventing war through strength, not through weakness, through strength. Weakness leads to war. Weakness leads to disaster. I don't want us to be engaged in a war. Wars are debilitating for countries. There are just wars. There are times where you can't avoid it. The Nazis needed to be defeated. Imperial Japan needed to be defeated. But you largely want to avoid war as much as you can, not at the price of your freedoms, of course. And the way you do that is by being strong, by ensuring that your adversaries know they don't want a war either, because they can't win any war against us. And I think you're going to have a policy of peace through strength.
Do you consider this Ukraine war as it stands today and how prolonged it has been, do you consider this a just war at this point, or do we have to take steps to try to negotiate some kind of peace here and wrap this up?
Yeah, let me say, I have tremendous admiration for the Ukrainians and how they have stood up and fought a much larger and much more powerful country. What they've done is extraordinary, and I think we should acknowledge that. And we've helped them, and other countries have helped them as well. I also think we need to acknowledge what the Biden administration knows to be true but refuses to acknowledge, and that is that this war right now is a stalemate. that even if we poured hundreds of billions of dollars into the hands of Ukraine, their ability to defeat a country that is simply just much larger at a scale, they can just make weapons faster, they can just conscript more people. It's not a realistic option, you know, and it's also not realistic. Okay, it's just not. We're lying to people when we tell them you're going to be able to go to Congress and get $60 billion every 10 months. That's just not realistic.
Right.
And so, add to that, Ukraine's being wiped out. I mean, every day Ukraine is being hit and damaged in ways that is going to take 100 years to repair. And restore. So we do want to see that conflict end, and it's going to require some very difficult choices. I'm not going to get ahead of myself and tell you these are what the choices are going to have to be made, but I think it's one of those instances that's going to call for pragmatism. I don't like what Vladimir Putin did, but I can tell you that, and we do have an interest in what happens there, but I think the future of the 21st century is going to largely be defined by what happens in the Indo-Pacific. And I think China would love for us to be bogged down in Europe in a conflict and not focused on what's happening in the Indo-Pacific, where every day they are threatening not just Taiwan, but the Philippines.
Yeah, and I want to get to China in a second. NATO members told NatSec Daily this week that there's some nervousness with the return of President Trump as president of the United States. What do you expect to see there in NATO?
So NATO's a military alliance, and an alliance means you have partners, and every partner does their part. And I'm going to tell you, the countries on the eastern flank of NATO, whether it's Germany, Poland, and Lithuania, you know, the countries on the eastern side, the ones closest to Russia, they're doing their part. The Poles, as an example, do above the 3% requirement. Other countries in Western Europe do not. They have these huge social safety networks, right? They've built these massive government programs. You retire at 55, you get all these things, and they spend less on their military, of course, because they've got NATO to protect them, largely the United States. And so I think Donald Trump's argument is the same argument, by the way, that every American president for the last 25 years have had, and that is, guys, we get it. We're the biggest country. We're going to contribute a lot to NATO, but you guys are rich countries. You need to do your part as well. And so here we are every day in our own country grappling with how do we provide assistance to Americans, even as we have these defense requirements that we're spending a lot of money on. And these countries are not making that choice. And Donald Trump is just saying out loud and more repeatedly what every American president before him has complained about. And that is that rich countries in Western Europe have not done their part in terms of stepping up to the plate and contributing more to NATO. And so I think you're going to continue to hear him say, we're not against this alliance, but it has to be a real alliance. And rich countries in this alliance have to do their fair share of their contribution. In the end, they are the closest in proximity to the problem. And I don't think that's unrealistic. I think the average everyday person in America would say that makes all the sense in the world.
No, I think they're upset because he's going to make them pay their fair share again. We often hear about paying your fair share, rarely about NATO countries. So, you know, he's probably going to return to that policy. President Xi of China called the president-elect this week. He said they have to find a way to get along. Now, I know President Trump has vowed a 60% tariff on Chinese goods. China has been very aggressive, as you well know, as you alluded to a moment ago, toward Taiwan of late, in the South China Sea. How do you think Trump's approach will differ from Biden in that region of the world?
Well, I think one of the things that President Trump understands that a lot of people who have spent time in politics sometimes forget is you can be friendly with someone. Look, China is a big, powerful country. They have nuclear weapons. We have to be able to talk to them. No one's saying that, we're not going to talk to you anymore. It's not high school where you just stop talking to somebody because you don't like them. We have to deal with these people. By the same token, he's also said, look, I mean, you want to put it simply? You're not going to be able to do in America what we're not allowed to do in China. Why do Chinese companies get to do whatever they want in our economy, but our companies do not? How come they get to export whatever they want here, but they restrict what we're able to send there? How come they're able to steal our company's secrets and then open up a competitor and put American companies out of business? On the other hand, they don't get that in reverse. So all Donald Trump is saying is we're going to get along, but we're going to get along in an even playing field, not one in which China continues to be allowed to cheat and steal and get away with things that are bad for America. Again, if I went out right now and walked 2 blocks to the nearest bakery here in Miami, Florida, and I said that, everybody in there would say that makes all the sense in the world. But somehow, all these highly credentialed experts in Washington think this is crazy talk. They're the ones that are crazy. Yeah. This is the way things have to be. And I think China would respect that a lot more than some of this doublespeak and silliness that you get from the current administration.
Senator Rubio, as you know, the Middle East is on fire. You've got Israel still waging this battle against Hamas. You've got Iran dropping missiles on Israel and vice versa. How do you bring peace to that region? For some, the Trump administration in the first iteration were able to do that with the Abraham Accords. Is it possible to restore the Abrahamic Accords?
It's not just possible to restore them. I think it's possible to expand them. And I think it all begins by recognizing what Donald Trump understands very clearly, and that is the source of conflict in the Middle East is not Israel. It's not the Palestinian question. The sole source and the core source of instability and violence in the Middle East is the Ayatollah in Iran. That is the source. That the Islamic Republic, the revolution, they want to be the dominant power in the region. Without Iran, there is no Hamas. Without Iran, there is no Hezbollah. Without Iran, there are no Shia militias attacking us from Iraq and Syria. Without Iran, none of these things happen. It is Iran. Without Iran, the Houthis don't exist and certainly don't have the weapons they have now to threaten global shipping in the Red Sea. Without Iran, they are the source of all of it. And so Iran has to be deterred. And the only thing that Iran cares about more, the only thing they care about more than being the most powerful country in the Middle East, the only thing they care about more is regime survival, surviving in power. And I think Donald Trump is a threat to that, which is why they want to kill him. Let me be clear, they want to kill Donald Trump. That's been documented in the open source, and that is why they fear him. And I think reestablishing that deterrence, where they clearly understand that if they continue on this pattern, it threatens their regime and its survival. I don't know why Joe Biden doesn't pick up the phone and say, if anything happens to Donald Trump or any American for that matter, and you guys are behind it, the Ayatollah is in danger. I mean, with that message alone, these threats would go away. They refuse to do it. That's the way you have to deal, because these people, these are not Belgium diplomats at the United Nations. Okay, these are radical Shia clerics who believe they have a religious obligation to dominate the region and drive us out and drive every Jew out of the region as well. And so you have to be very clear and very firm in how you deal with it. This administration has not been. Donald Trump will be and has been in the past.
Before I let you go, you have said that President Trump has fundamentally remade the Republican Party. How so? And has it become the party of the working man and working women, though? Is it a new Republican Party?
It is, and I think the question is, will it remain that? You know, one thing is to win an election with Donald Trump as your candidate, but can it remain that without him? What I can tell you is that the Republican Party of 2010, 2012, 2008, that Republican Party doesn't exist anymore. And so the Republican Party that exists now is a Republican Party that is fueled by men and women of every race, ethnicity in the country that you can imagine, who are largely working people and small business owners. They are not elites on Wall Street. They are not elites in New York. They are not elites in Washington, D.C. These are people that work for a living. They take a shower after work, not before work, and they're raising their families. That's the core of our party. That's the core of the Republican Party. That is the coalition that drove us to this enormous win and a majority in the Senate and hopefully a majority in the House, keeping a majority in the House as well. And that's the future of the Republican Party. And more than the Republican Party, that is a governing coalition. What that means is that is a coalition around which you can put together 60 votes in the Senate and a majority in the House to actually get things done. The reason why we have gridlock in our political process is because we haven't had a governing coalition in America for 25 years, a sort of bipartisan consensus on these items. You can build a bipartisan consensus on these items and govern the country, but we have to actually go do it. We can't just sit back and say we won the election and now that's a license to do whatever we want. No, this is a mandate to do what you said you would do.
Senator Marco Rubio, thank you for your time. Thank you for being here. We'll check in with you in the days ahead, sir.
Thank you.